Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hey there, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's terrific to have your company for another episode of the show. Now, in practice, we want to have patients who love us, who refer us to their family and friends, and who are intensely loyal. And that doesn't happen by accident. One of the businesses around the world that is famous for creating raving fans and loyal customers is Disney. And my guest today is John Formica, who spent 10 years working in Disney, crafting customer experiences and shaping the way that Disney does business. And in this episode, he's going to unpack some of the lessons from Disney, some of the core Disney philosophies that are applicable to every single business, including dental practices, so that you can take this and install them into your own business. Now, when you get this right, what you're going to have is an enhanced patient experience. Patients are going to have not just a great clinical experience, they're going to have a wonderful customer service experience. And when that happens, they're going to be happy as can be, tell their family, tell their friends, refer their family, refer their friends, leave you favorable reviews, and keep coming back again and again and again. And that is a core fundamental outcome of what we want to have in our practice. And if you get this right, obviously that has tremendous benefits for you, for your team, and so on. But it all stems from creating relationships and caring. And in this podcast, you're going to hear John talk about that very, very deeply. And it's a core part of the Disney philosophy. And I know that if you take this and apply it into your own practice, you're going to see your practice grow exponentially. It's going to give you so much differentiation in the marketplace. It's going to allow you to resist commoditization. It's going to allow you to do things in your practice that you wouldn't otherwise get the opportunity to do, and to have new levels of fulfillment and happiness in your work as well. So I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoyed recording it with John. If you want to find out more about what John does, head across to his website, johnformica.com, and I know there's a ton of resources there that you can avail yourself of. But without any further ado, here's John. John, welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us. How's things all the way in North Carolina?
It is awesome. It's actually, this is our winter. I know you're coming into your summer, but we had our first Arctic blast of cold. So we're in the 20s and 30s, and we're not ready for that yet. So it's beautiful. It's sunny. Can't beat that.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, when you guys say 20s and 30s, I have to remember that's Fahrenheit, not Celsius, because we're in the 20s today as well, but obviously different scale. So different thing. John, you spent quite a lot of time, about a decade, I believe, working at Disney. You've obviously moved into becoming a world-leading authority on customer service, creating experiences. You've delivered something like 3,000 keynotes to different organizations around the world. I'm curious to ask how your time at Disney began. How did that come about, and why did you stay so long? It must have been a wonderful place to work if you stayed for a decade.
Yeah. My background, Jesse, was I managed hotels for Hyatt hotels. That was most of my career in the hotel industry, and then so I was mostly doing convention hotels, business type hotels in large cities, Washington D.C., Chicago. And when Disney came calling, asked and recruited me to work there, it was really at a perfect time because this was the mid to late 80s. And when I got to Disney, we had 4 hotels and a campground at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. But there were 16 brand new hotels on the drawing board to be built. They were about to explode in the resort division. And my job was to help open up each of the new hotels, help hire the staff, help train the staff, and help create teams that would create great experiences at each one of those Disney properties. So it was a great time, a booming era of not only in the resorts, but even the parks was exploding and everything else. So it was really a great time that, I thought we were going to take over the world at one time. We were just doing everything and nothing could go wrong. But it was a great experience, but it wasn't very difficult for me to make that transition to Disney because of their belief of that customer experience, of the belief of quality, the belief of creating happiness, as Disney would put it. And, in the hotel industry, you're in the hospitality industry, that's what I did. And now I just could really, Disney does it on steroids. And so it was just that great opportunity to do that, and, moved around to different properties as we opened up new hotels, and they moved me around to where I could fit with the company. And it was great. It was not an easy decision to leave. It was a quick, over a decade went by really quick, but it was just maybe time to move on, because my goal was to see if I could take everything I learned at Disney and their model, their success model, and does that model apply to any other organizations outside of the Disney. And I helped manage one of the largest convention hotels in the state of North Carolina. That's kind of brought me to away from Disney. And my goal was to see if everything could work, but what I didn't realize was a dysfunctional hotel, pretty bad. And it took 2 years to change the culture, where we finally won a Pinnacle Award for the top convention hotel in the state and top 5 in the southeast of the United States. And that's when I realized the model works outside of Disney. And it wasn't easy leaving Disney, but it was between personal and professional and family. It was best move at the time.
Yeah. So it's really interesting you spoke about the transference of the Disney philosophy outside of Disney to other businesses, but it took a while because of the culture that needed to change at that North Carolina convention hotel. I'm curious to ask about Disney culture, if that's the case, because obviously you've got Walt's DNA pretty much on everything, but then you've got Roy's DNA kind of making everything operationally successful as well. And so how did those two forces come together to create, I guess, what is that Disney culture? And the reason I'm asking that is because for someone listening to this podcast, they might be thinking, well, I like the idea of applying some of these Disney principles, which we'll get into in due course, but maybe I need to kind of go back a step and look at the culture in my practice and reevaluate what that needs to be.
Yeah, it's so true that you were saying that Walt was an incredible leader, but really a terrible manager. And you think, how could he build this empire being a terrible manager? Well, his brother Roy was the manager, and Roy, and the financier and the negotiator and all that stuff. And Walt was a creative person, but Walt believed in people, and that was his biggest success as a leader. He was inspiring because everything he visualized, he brought to life for others to see, and his legacy just continues on. And when you think about a Disney culture, it's really about, the experience. But, it's a theme park. They have rides, they have castles, they have parades, and people think that's the experience. And yes, it is. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to take away from that. But it's the people that create those experiences. And one of my favorite quotes from Walt says, "You can design and create the most wonderful place in the world, but it takes people to make the dream a reality." And it takes people to create the culture. And the culture is focused totally on the experience. Disney called it the magic. We empowered our staff. We trained our staff. We enabled our staff to create those experiences. Yes, a lot of structure at Disney. A lot of, this is how we do things at Disney. But the freedom for the staff to know why it is so important to create those experiences. Not just what you do and how you do it, but why you do it. It's all started from the hiring process, in my workshops. And when I work with leaders, I tell them you have to hire for culture. You can't just convert culture. You have to hire for culture. So the first thing you need to do is define what culture you want, and then hire based on that. So at Disney, all the questions we asked, the interview process was all based on, is this somebody that could fit in our culture? Have they fit in some other place that was an example of that culture that now they can apply here at Disney? And so you can't fake it. You can't do what most people do. They hire people and they say, well, here's our culture. Here's how you have to transform or adjust or adapt into our culture. And as you know, sometimes that can work, but as you know, it's hard to work. So you hire people, you onboard them, you train them, reinforcing that culture, and then everything else during their work life at Disney is all either being coached or reinforced or recognized or appreciated or empowered to keep that culture alive. And that's how you do that. And it's not easy. We didn't walk around with big sticks beating people over the head, right? We created an environment where they want to do it, not feel like they have to do it, right? And that's like you hire for heart, and Disney hires for heart.
I think that's a really important point that you make about hiring for that culture fit, because, again, you can't change the basic nature of someone. Either they're a fit or they're not. And that doesn't mean they're a good or a bad person. It just means, is this the right place for them? I wanted to just explore that a little bit further, if I can, please, John, because I think a lot of people will be saying, that's awesome, and I understand conceptually what to do, but in practice, how does that evolve? What sort of questions, what sort of training, what sort of onboarding specifically might occur in the Disney environment? And I know not everything is going to be a direct application to dental practice, but at the same time, if you could give us a couple of examples, that would be really useful, just to allow people to get a thought starter in their own mind, and then and take it away from there.
When companies try to say they want a culture just like Disney, or why can't we hire people just like Disney? And so to me, it starts with, what are the core values of an organization? That's usually the culture. And so a lot of companies have a vision statement, right? That's where you want to go. A mission statement is what you need to do to get there, right? Nothing wrong with that. But the core values are how you're going to get there. What are the behaviors that your staff and people have to do in order to create that culture? And are those core values verbs? Do they really have a meaning? Do you reinforce it? Do you talk about it? Or is it just on some handbook or on a wall somewhere or on a business card, and we never talk about it? So I always try to work with my clients and say, okay, show me your core values. And a lot of them have maybe 5, 6, 7 core values. They're all good. They're, integrity, trust, commitment, customer service, teamwork. All those things are great, right? But I always say, give me 2 or 3 that are unnegotiable. And those are the ones we're going to focus on and make them into verbs so that they become actionable and you can actually do it. And you teach it, you train through it, you reward, recognize, coach, you do all that through those. And then they become more alive and people can do that. So if you have core values, go back to try to figure out, okay, so if I want this person to have a core value that matches that, what kind of questions am I asking them that demonstrates that they've done that core value, that they've lived that core value? It's kind of interesting. I had a CEO one time, and I said, give me one of your core values. And he told me customer service is our number one priority. That's one of our number one core values. And I said, then why was I on hold for 20 minutes? Right? So it's your core value, and it sounds good, but if it's not a verb, then it's nothing. So even in a dental practice, find out what those core values are that are non-negotiable, and then develop questions around them. Like I was working with a country club, and they had distinguished service, extraordinary distinguished service. That was their promised message. That was their main core value. Well, does anybody know what distinguished service is? I don't know.
No.
So now you're going to try to hire somebody. Do you even know what that is? Do they know what that is? So you kind of have to educate them a little bit, but okay, share with me an example where you provided distinguished service to a customer or a fellow coworker or teammate or in church or whatever it is, because sometimes they may not have experience. They might be a young person or whatever. And tell me what you did, not what you could do or should do. I want to know what you did. And once they answer that question, I'm now going to probe even further to find out, so how long did it take you before you did that? Or how did you feel when you did that? Or how did the customer feel? What was their response? I'm going to dive in for 2 reasons. 1, I want to make sure that your heart's really in it. And 2, I want to make sure you're not lying to me, that you're making this stuff up, right? Because, we all have had people that have done great on an interview and then bad on the job 6 months later, right? And, in a dental practice is nothing more than a small business. And, 1 or 2 people in a dental practice, if they're not good, they'll tear down the whole thing because that's like 10% of the labor, 20% of the labor, right? So you don't have all this room for error. And so we want to make sure that so I always, to your audience out there, just find out what those core values are and then ask those questions in a behavioral manner. Not do you like customers? Do you like taking care of customers and that kind of stuff? Because they're going to say yes.
Do you have integrity?
Yeah. Do you have integrity? Are you dependable? Yes. Yeah. Give me examples. And I'm going to probe and dive in. And that's where what I love to do with my clients, no matter what industry it is, my coaching clients, I actually dive into, we'll develop those questions and we'll get to about like 15, 20 questions that they have in their hands ready to ask during an interview. Now, they may not ask all 15 or 20, but those are the ones that we want to be able to ask when that time comes in that conversation, because those are the ones we have to make sure, is this the right fit? I know they have experience, or if not, I can teach them that experience. But what experience are they going to bring? What value are they going to bring to my company, organization? And that's how we go through that. And that's the beginning piece. And then obviously once we hire them, it's that onboarding. Let's set the tone of who we are. Well, one of the things I always share is, I tell new hires, it's a privilege and honor to work for me because I don't hire anybody. So I just want to let them know. And I'll give you an example, Jesse. When I was interviewed to work at Disney, I got a phone interview that just was sort of an inquiry to see if I was interested. Yes, the answer was pretty easy. Then I got an interview from an HR person who asked me more specific questions about my background, about my interest in those sort of things, typical HR type questions. And then they asked if I would come to Disney World in Orlando. I guess I did okay on those first two. Would I come to Orlando for 2.5 days for interviews? And I said, sure, right? So I'm looking, 2.5 days, isn't that a long time just to do an interview? I guess, well, it's a big place. Maybe one day is a tour. The other day is going to be, meeting some people. I don't know. So I go to Disney World and I can't even stay in the hotel because they only had 4 hotels at the time. They were all full. So they put me off property. I got a nice little basket, water and some cookies, which was nice. And there's a portfolio opening up, and it's 2 straight days of interviews. 8 interviews one day, 8 interviews the next day. Every hour on the hour. I'm thinking, holy, there's no way I'm going to get this job. I can't fool 16 people, right?
Yeah.
I can fool you. But what did it tell me, Jesse? It told me that Disney doesn't fool around.
Yeah.
But yet, if I'm an organization, if I'm a dental practice, if I'm a small business, and the reputation is I'll hire anybody, guess who shows up? Anybody. And I'm not saying you need to have 16 interviews for every candidate because it's challenging, but you want to make sure you get it right as best that you can. No, nothing's 100% sure, but so that's an important piece. And then that onboarding, of course, is the next thing where you define your cultures as a company and you make sure they understand the history, the story, the culture, the values, why they're so important. Give examples, have testimonials from employees, have testimonials from your customers where those values were demonstrated. Help them drink the Kool-Aid.
I wanted to ask you, John, a bit about the Disney team members. And you mentioned earlier that there's a lot of structure. This is how we do things at Disney, which, clearly you would need to. But equally, not every circumstance, not every situation fits neatly within a book of processes. There's going to be occasions where you've got to paint outside the lines, to use that language, and use your initiative and make a decision on the fly. I wanted to ask you about that balance between structure and freestyle, in the sense that if the outcome is to create wonderful experiences for the customers of Disney, where does initiative come into that? Where does sticking to the structure, sticking to the script come in? And where can you maybe blur those edges a little bit?
Really, the structure, Jesse, is about the expectations. What are the expectations? That's where the structure is. The do's and don'ts, the musts, the unnegotiables. What we stand for. All of those things is where the structure is, so that everybody knows exactly where they stand and what their role is and what their objectives are. And then you're empowered or to be creative in doing that. So that's where the unstructured comes. It's kind of like the Disney promise messages, it's the happiest place on earth. And our purpose at Disney, the reason why they hire you is to make people happy, right? So as long as you're doing that and it's legal and it's not immoral or unethical or there's no safety or security issues involved, go for it. Go for it. And that's where the reinforcement of that creativity that we allowed my staff to do those things within reason. Let's just say if there was somebody was checking into one of my hotels and they found out that these people were celebrating an anniversary. Well,
yes.
The cast member at the front desk could automatically trigger a order for a fruit basket to room service, so it gets delivered to their room with a thank you note that says, "Happy anniversary, we're glad you're here," right? We told them why we wanted them to do that, but they can't do Dom Perignon champagne and go crazy over the thing. We have a budget that we're trying to do this, but we encourage you to do that and make it personal. Do a personal note, not just from the hotel. Make it from Susie and the front desk team. It becomes a relationship that we're forming, not with the hotel and Disney, but with the staff and the personalization that goes along with that. That's where Disney does a great job, empowering those people to do things. And you've all heard stories where, someone in the parks bought an ice cream and the kid took 2 licks and the ice cream fell off the cone, right? And out of nowhere comes a Disney cast member, apologizes, cleans his things up, and go gets him another cone for free. Who does that? Disney does that. That's a cost of doing business, but it's all part of that experience that Disney wants to be known for. And that story will be told a zillion times, which is marketing, right?
Yeah. Oh, every day. Every day is marketing.
And so that's where that creativity comes.
John, I've always been impressed by Disney's ability to turn a profit. I mean, they're an immensely profitable business. And I'd read a little while ago that on a per square meter basis or per square foot basis, that Disney makes more money than Las Vegas. And we all know the activities that go in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Walt was very commercial. I know Roy was very commercial. And people pay for those things willingly, happily. What's the environment that allows people to happily pay more for things at Disney than they would elsewhere? And secondly, can you talk about Disney's pricing structure at all?
Yeah. I haven't been there a while, so I can't go into all the details of the pricing structure, but I'll give you a little bit of a philosophy
behind the pricing.
Yeah.
Behind the pricing.
But here's when I was there, and I'm sure maybe it's changed somewhat, but so again, going back to if we give you a great experience, we're all willing to pay for it if it brings us value and it's worth it. That's no different than anything. And, I shared the experience of my wife and I going on vacation during our summers. We like to go to the beach in North Carolina's and South Carolina beaches, which are beautiful. But I'm in charge of accommodations, and I have to make sure we get a place. It's a condo, Airbnb, Vrbo, hotel, something, but it's got to be right on the beach because my wife wants to watch the sunrise with a cup of coffee in her hand in the morning, right? That cost me a lot of money just because of that experience, but it's worth it. And I'm willing to pay because one, we don't go on vacation all the time. We don't live on the beach. So they say, do all that, but it's worth it. So I'm willing to pay. And all of us, your listeners, are all willing to pay more if you give me a great experience, or in other words, you bring me value, not just provide a service or a product, but you bring me value. And Disney goes out of the way to create experiences. That's the whole magic behind Disney is those experiences. And they're all seamless from the moment you make a reservation for the time you arrive to the time you get on a bus or monorail to you enter the parks or the resorts. It's all how do we create magical experiences. And so I used to always encourage my staff. One of the things that Walt talked about, and I share in my workshops and keynotes, it's about Walt's philosophy of the plus factor. And the plus factor is whatever you do, plus it by one. What he meant, do this much more. Not this much more, this much more. And what did he mean by that? It could be any little thing that could turn into a big thing, right? But if everybody does this much more, does a little bit extra, provides a little bit more in that experience, it all adds up. And if you think about it, how big Disney World or even Disneyland is, if everybody does that, those experiences just become overwhelming to the typical family or guest, because they're just getting hit all the time. And it takes their mind off the price is what it does, right? Takes their mind off. It's just like me. I don't realize how much more money I spent on that place on the beach because I'm in the middle of the experience. So Disney has to continue to do that. And the staff has to continue to do that. And I will tell you, there's got to be a fine line somewhere, I don't know what it is yet, where if you step over that line, the value or the experience isn't going to be worth the price. And I don't know how they do it because they disguise it in so many different ways. The resorts are priced based on location and destination. You can go to the Grand Floridian Beach Resort, which is their 5-star, 5-diamond hotel. And I got to open up that hotel. And, we hosted presidents and Princess Diana and Michael Jackson. And that's where you're going to go. Well, that's the biggest, that's going to be the biggest cost for that. Now, the average person might say, that's ridiculous. Why would I spend that much money? I'm just going to go into the park, 6 o'clock in the morning till midnight. Why do I want to spend all that money? Then that's not the resort property for you. Go to one of the other properties, right?
Yeah.
So they're priced that way based on the different experiences that you have. And we played with that for a while, but that's the main reason behind the structure. And I share with you, there's a statistic, 84% of people will spend more money for a better experience. And we all do it in different capacities. That's one thing. The other thing is when Disney makes some of those decisions, they do a lot of research before they make that decision. And I know what we did based on prices of the hotels going up, the prices of the park tickets going up. There was enough research that would say, as long as you're giving me this experience and value, we're willing to pay that. They don't just say, gee, we got to make a couple more $1 billion. Let's just raise the ticket prices by another $5, right? There's some surveys, research behind that before. Now, sometimes we always used to wonder, are they looking at the right research, right? I remember a lot of the decisions that were made were even asked the staff, how would you feel if we did this? What's your feedback based on the interaction that you have with your guests? I mean, that also comes into consideration as well. So everybody has some input before these big decisions are made. And then when they make them, we have to live up to that. If they're going to raise the prices, then what do we do to create even bigger and better experiences, to take the eye off the price? And it boils down to human connection, and it boils down to memorable experiences. And you'll pay a lot of money for memories, won't we?
Oh, absolutely. And I think when we leave this earth, the thing that we leave behind for our family and our kids and all those are those memories, as much as anything else. And I think those are the shared experiences that we want to have with our loved ones. I'm curious to ask about the Imagineers at Disney and what role they play. And again, is there a role for other businesses, such as dentists, to have an Imagineer department in their practice?
Yeah. So the Imagineers are all about telling the story, right? That's what they do. They tell the story, whether it's a ride, movie, something. It starts with that story. So when I relate that to businesses, I ask the business, first of all, why would I do business with you, right? So if I'm asking your dental audiences out there, why would I do business with you? And I get response, and I have clients as dentists as well. And they'll tell me, well, we have the state-of-the-art equipment. We've been in practice for 25 years. We have great staff. We follow up on appointments, and all those things are great, right? They're all great. But do I know your story that I can connect with you? And every dentist practice has a story, where you started from, why you got into dentistry in the first place, right? What's your objective of dentistry, right? Does it just want to make money, or do you want to really care about the health and well-being of your patients, particularly in an oral type of experience? So what does that story look like? And that story starts with the website. If you have a website, is the story being told on a website? Sometimes there's an about page and there's a long content, paragraphs of, nobody reads that stuff. So we want to try to connect emotionally. So to answer your question, Imagineers do a great job connecting with us all emotionally, whether it's movies or rides, whatever it might be. Emotionally, we get sucked in. and so we want to try to create an experience that touches the emotions of our customers, of our guests, of our clients, whoever they might be, where that emotional connection creates loyalty, right? And we create that loyalty through relationships, through the experiences. And now we have that connection where I'm not going anywhere. I want to continue to do this. And dentists there are a lot of old school dentists that have been around for a long time. And I have one of those. I lived in Charlotte for 27 years and had the same dentist for 27 years. And I'm not going anywhere. There might be some things I don't like. There might be some things I really like. But the relationships that I formed with the hygienist, with the office staff, and with the doctor, I'm not leaving. That's a relationship that I don't want to jeopardize going someplace else because it's maybe cheaper or whatever, or they're bigger. They have better equipment. I don't know. But here in the States, dental offices and dental practices are opening up on every corner.
Yeah, same here.
And they're like,
they're everywhere.
it's like a franchise model now where, they're everywhere and they're huge and they have all the bells and whistles and the fancy building and all the, beautiful landscaping and everything else. Yet, my dentist is in a little business industrial park and he's got, there's a lot of different businesses there. Mostly not retail business, not business that you would go to visit. It's more of a corporate park or whatever. And he's in there and I'm fine with that. I don't need all the bells and whistles, but again, it's the relationships that we have and the stories that are being told where this dental practice has just been handed down. Like I said, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving.
Yeah, I love that. The story that connects is, we have a model where we talk about culture and we talk about the role of stories to create connection and culture as well. And I agree wholeheartedly with you. I'm curious to ask about that experience, that personal emotional connection and the experience to create loyalty, because loyalty versus satisfaction is something we'll explore in a second as well if we can. But I wanted to ask you about creating experiences and connection at scale, because in this podcast we do have people listen who have 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 practices more. And how do you create that at scale? Because one of the things that we've observed is it's pretty easy to run a 2-chair practice when you can kind of hear every word that's being said in every corridor of the practice. But when you start to have larger organizations, how do you create that same experience en masse or at scale and make sure that it's consistent across the board?
It's all about leadership. It's about leadership. The culture is created by the people, right? They're the ones that make the magic, to say, but it's reinforced through leadership. And we know in many organizations the inconsistency that we get based on lack of leadership or lack of the right leadership. I use an example of Starbucks. Here in the United States, Starbucks is a huge coffee, right, place. And I'm a big coffee snob. When I mean snob, I got to have good, strong coffee. And I know I go to any Starbucks in the United States and I order a tall pike. It's just a plain black coffee. It's tall as just the size. And I know no matter where I go.
Pike from the Pike Place markets in Seattle, right?
That's right? That's just a brand. But every Every Starbucks has pike. It's not like, well, we're not brewing it. It's their standard. But I know I can go anywhere in the United States, and if I order a tall pike, it tastes the same. So product-wise, they do a great job. Consistency, that's good. However, when I walk inside a freestanding Starbucks store, cafe, whatever you want to call it, I have no idea what kind of experience I'm going to get. And some are really good, and some are really bad. And when they're really bad,
that's interesting.
I look to whoever's the manager of that Starbucks is the reason why. Because there's no standards, there's no structure, there's no experiences. I'll walk in at 6:30 in the morning and the trash can is overflowing before you even walk in. And then you walk in, there's no music on. And I get up to the counter and the person says, "Can I help you?" And I go, "I'll take a tall pike, please." You know, they give him my tall pike and I swipe my loyalty card. And that's it. I'm going, seriously? And then I hear the baristas are going, you know, they're just putting orders. They're not telling anybody. They're not, I mean, they have the name on the cup. They're not saying, "John, your cappuccino's ready." They just leave it on the counter. And I'm thinking, what on earth is going on? Who's the leader of that store? Who hasn't put systems in place or structure in place to say, these are the things that are unacceptable. And these are the kind of people I'm hiring. The people that are just, I'm thinking they're on drugs. They're drinking too much coffee because they're all bubbly and, you know, that's the kind of person I want, right? And yet I've gone to others, Jess, and they've been just phenomenal. And I go, man, and there's one by my neighborhood that's, I call it my Starbucks, right? And I always tell my clients, if you can create a business model where they go from a Starbucks to the Starbucks to my Starbucks, you've done a good thing, right? As compared to a dental practice, the dental practice, or my dental practice, right? And that's where you're trying to create that in there. So leadership. So when I do leadership workshops for many organizations, even keynotes, whatever it might be, or when I'm coaching my clients individually one-on-one, I'm trying to help them understand is the culture needs to be reinforced through that leadership. And we all, you know, I do training workshops, and some companies, you know, I know when I leave, nothing's going to happen. They just think, oh, because John was here and did this training workshop, that all of a sudden we're going to be great. Where's the reinforcement? Where's the recognition, the rewards, the coaching, the accountability, the hiring for that culture? Where is all that? And that falls under leadership. You know, one of the traits of Walt's leadership was you got to have personal appeal. And personal appeal means you got to be able to communicate and inspire and give people the tools needed to do those jobs. And some leaders don't have that. I'm not saying you need to be an extrovert or a big cheerleader or a people person to be a leader, but you got to be able to inspire people to your message or accountability, or it just doesn't get done, right?
Something that occurred to me just as you were speaking there is about the leadership role, and you were talking about Starbucks and how the leader sets the tone for the practice or for the business or the the enterprise. And I certainly concur and agree with that. And one of the things that also was just rattling through my mind at that moment was, why does that not translate across the whole business? And one of the things that I was reflecting on as you were speaking is sometimes I wonder whether people in whatever role that they might have might say, I'm only such and such, therefore my role is not to create that experience. And, you know, maybe that experience creation thing is best left to others. But my personal perspective is that every opportunity that we interact with a customer is either a marketing or a sales opportunity. Yeah. And I'm just curious around your thoughts about, the leader engaging the team in the whole experience, and how does that trickle down from the leader to the rest of the team as well, so that even the janitor, the person who changes the toilet paper in the Starbucks, goes, it's 6:30 in the morning, someone may come in, they may need the facilities. How do we make sure they're clean and presentable and ready to go?
Yeah. What I do in my programs, Disney calls it showtime, right? You are on stage. And when you are on stage and it's showtime, everything matters, right? All attention to details matter. And there's a lot that goes into that. And I do a little fun exercise. It's called the 7-10 rule. And the 7-10 rule is in 7 seconds, people form 10 or more first impressions. And where are those first impressions from? They could be anywhere. It could be from a phone call. So based on the tone of voice or the information that you share on the phone call, it could be when I enter your business or I enter your practice, or maybe it's the parking lot or the signage or what they're wearing, or are you organized, or your body language, and it just goes on and on. We do a brainstorming exercise for that. But from a leadership perspective is, okay, we know these are the first impressions. We know that this is going to affect the show, the on-stage performance. But from a leadership perspective, do people know what good work even looks like? Or do we assume? If I tell somebody, here's your uniform, you need to wear it for work because that's your uniform. But do they know what a good uniform is supposed to look like? All right, so I put my uniform on, but I haven't shaved, my hair's all greasy, I haven't taken a bath, my shirt looks like I got run over by a truck, I'm wearing the wrong shoes. Wait a minute. What happens? The manager goes, what are you doing? You can't do that. Don't you realize we're supposed to dress professionally? Don't you have, and we're all doing that, but yet whose job is it to make sure they know what good work looks like? I work with a restaurant, and I do a lot of things. I'll do is sometimes I'll do customer experience evaluations first. I'll go walk in like nobody knows who I am, and I start interviewing customers, but staff. I look at everything and kind of come up with that experience, not just a shopper, but that experience. And then I base my training based on that. But sometimes, people don't realize what it looks like when you're on stage and what showtime is and the reflection of what that guest or customer is actually seeing. And so I did this one with a restaurant, and I said, I'm just talking to the employee. She has no idea where I am. I said, boy, some of these tables that are a mess. Some of these people, when they leave from eating, it's a mess. How do you make sure you keep their table clean? And they go, we take all the dishes away, and then I got my spray bottle and I wipe the counter. And I go, okay. What about under the table? What about the chair? Like, look at all the milk that was spilt on the chair from the kid. They were told just to clean the table. And by the way, they use the same rag for every table. So that rag isn't very clean either, right? But if I talk to the management about that, they're like, oh yeah, I told her yesterday she needs to look under the table once in a while. No, not once in a while.
No.
Every single time, because the next customer, it's showtime again, right? And we have to start all over again. So leadership has to make sure, not with a heavy hand, not with a big stick, not with a lot of yelling, you have to, you're going to, you better, all that kind of stuff. It's, do they really know what good work looks like? And just why? Why it's important to make good work look like. Not because I tell you to do it, because it's the right thing to do in the experience. That's why we're doing it. Don't worry about me. You're not doing it for me. You're doing it for the guest.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, if we are in the business of creating happiness, as Walt is, everything that we do is seen through that lens, and that's the outcome. And ladies and gents, if you want to find out more about how to create amazing patient experiences in your practice, I'd really encourage you to go and see John. Go to his website, johnformica.com, or if you want to engage his services, I think his email address is info@johnformica.com. Mm-hmm. Just go there, send an email, because this is the stuff that actually does move your practice forward. It does create not just patient satisfaction, but patient loyalty, which creates repeat business, referrals. It creates, never-ending streams of cash flow, all those good commercial outcomes, and it's going to make your patients happy, but on top of that, it's going to make you happy too, because you'll be doing the best work of your life and you'll feel fulfilled. So, John, this is probably a question that's been on my mind for a little while, and it's probably going to seem a little bit out of kilter with the rest of the conversation we've had so far, but I want to ask it nonetheless, because
love it.
Last year we took some of our clients on a field trip, and one of the destinations in that field trip was the Disneyland experience in California, and it was amazing. We had a terrific time, and one of the things that struck me is that even a mundane experience is turned into something experiential. Waiting in queues, for example, becomes an experience. And so what I'm always curious about is, how do we turn the ordinary into the extraordinary? How do we turn a mundane experience like waiting into an experience? And that made me start thinking about waiting rooms. It made me think about reception areas. It made me think about all those sorts of things.
You have to.
I was lining up to go and meet Mickey, and
absolutely,
because, I'm a 53-year-old man. I want to meet Mickey. Of course I want to meet Mickey. I want my photo with Mickey. I want that experience, right? And so, but the cue was, watching old movies of Mickey and the other characters. How do we create an experience in our dental practice where we can make that waiting experience actually almost as fun as the rest of it?
Again, it goes back to that +1 that Walt talked about, the plus factor. What could you do this much more, right? You don't have to do this much more, but if everybody does this much more. And one of the things I like to do with my clients is we go through the entire journey, the customer experience journey, every touch point that a customer has with your business. We review it. We review it from a operational standpoint, but we also review it as an emotional standpoint. And what can we do to make it that much better? What can we do that will enhance a little bit more to get people to talk about it or be memorable, whatever it is? So the touch point. So if you think about the waiting area, it's another touch point. It's one of the first touch points, right? They come in, maybe they meet the receptionist, and they say, "Okay, thank you, Mr. Formica. Please sit down." And John, or sit down, and we'll be right with you, right? So now I sit down, and what is the typical one? You got magazines, you got nice furniture, and you wait. Now, hopefully the wait isn't long, right? That's the big thing. You don't want the wait long. It's not like they're going to be there for hours. But what can we do? And if we brainstorm ideas from the staff, not the dentists brainstorm ideas, but the whole staff going, what would be cool? What would be neat? What would be a wow factor? What would be something that somebody would talk about? I'm sure you're going to come up with some examples. I'll give you an example with one of my dental practices that we did this. And so they actually had coffee in their waiting area. They had a little refrigerator for water, and they had coffee, especially in the morning time. So it doesn't mean you're going to have a cup of coffee before, right? Because hopefully you're not waiting that long. But when you're done, have a cup of coffee, right? To-go cup and everything like that. Well, they served the coffee in this styrofoam cup. I don't know if it's hard to see in the video. It's just a plain white styrofoam cup. And if you think about it, it reminded me of coffee you get at a gas station or, auto service repair shop,
very nondescript,
garage. And, it was there since 6:30 in the morning. You have no idea how, it's in those pots that just gets blacker and blacker, right? That's what it reminded me of. And I don't care what kind of coffee you put in it. It just reminded me of that. And I told them that. I said, what can we do to make this better? And what we did is we brainstormed. It's Starbucks.
Oh, nice. Okay, there we go.
So what we did is we started putting Starbucks coffee in the lobby, waiting area, and use Starbucks cups. Now, whether you like Starbucks or not, the brand of Starbucks is raised, right? It's not just any kind of coffee you got at the big box stores and you bought it in bulk, which most people do. We got Starbucks coffee, which meant it uplifted the value, it uplifted the prestige of this dentist that, we are at a different level. This dentist is at a different level. Just a little thing like that might have cost a little bit more money, not that much more, but the value went up. And I got to tell you, my dentist, I told him about this. He started to do that. You know what I do when I'm driving by close to his practice? I go in for a cup of coffee.
Grab a coffee, yeah.
And they go, John, it was great to see you. How's everything? I said, hey, and I joke, I'm just here for a cup of coffee. And they laugh, right? That's why I love them so much. That's why it's a relationship that I built with them. But the important thing is, I'm not saying that's the coffee that you do. It's all kinds of things. It could be anything, but do you want to just have the same old magazines? Do you have music on, right? That's the atmosphere going on. Maybe there's other things they can do. Maybe you make sure you have plugins for charging stations so people can charge their phone. Maybe they get into the waiting area and they didn't realize their phone's about to go dead. Wow. Look, there's a charging station right there. There's all kinds of little things, but also just for a waiting area, ask your customers, what could we do to make the waiting area more pleasurable? Some people might tell you the chairs that you have, they're hard as hell, right? I don't like them. Or maybe they're not, I'm so close to the next person. So maybe move them out, right? So, you're going to learn a lot from your own customers that now you're putting yourself in their shoes. sometimes that is all you need to create a great experience. It doesn't have to be really fancy schmancy. You don't have to put a lot of money. It's just doing little things that your customers want. And you go, gosh, why didn't we think of that? Right?
John, as I said, there's 300 questions I could ask you over the course of weeks and weeks and weeks, and we'll definitely need to invite you back to explore
Absolutely.
much more. But for now, I just want to take a moment to say thank you, because I think the concept of taking ideas from other industries and applying them to your own industry is a really good one, and our whole business has been founded on that. The Savvy Dentist business was built on the idea of not invented here. So I really want to thank you for helping dentists bring a little bit of Disney into their practice. And again, ladies and gents, I'd really encourage you to check out John's work. It's phenomenal. And if you want to create an amazing patient experience, that will come back to you 1,000-fold over. So head across to johnformica.com or email him at info@johnformica.com if you want to speak directly with him. Again, I think our patients deserve to have an experience that is elevated. I think our patients deserve the best that we can provide, within our experience, our expertise, and of course, making sure that we work in a commercially sensible way as well. So, John, once again, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I'm deeply grateful and look forward to round 2 of this conversation, because I think we've got a lot to cover.
Absolutely, Jesse, my pleasure. Thank you for all that you do. Like I tell people in the healthcare world, or even the auto service repair shop world, these are things that nobody wants to do. Nobody wants to go, gee, let's go to the dentist this weekend for fun, right? Nobody wants to get their car fixed. Nobody wants to do that. But if we can give them a great experience, they know they have to do it, right? But at least they'll walk out and say, but it was a positive, memorable experience. I love the staff, love the doctor. That'll get them to come back. And if you think about dentistry, we want them to come back because we care. We want them to be healthy. We want their teeth to stay forever. And we know you can't come every 10 years to a dentist and expect that to happen. You got to come on a regular basis because we care. We care about your well-being. If you think that way, I'm sure it'll be great. So also, Jess, I'll let everybody know, if you go to info@johnformica.com and just put in either the subject or in the comments, I'll schedule a free strategy session call with you, or discovery call with you. We'll just get on a call. No obligation. I won't sell you anything, but just to share some insight. I love doing that, giving back, my way to give back. But also I learned a lot from you as well. They can just do that, and I'll be happy to follow up on that as well. So
thank you, my friend.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jesse. Anytime. Thank you for what you do.
You're a good man, and looking forward to doing this again real soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessegreen.com and download the free report.